Tonight, the war criminals' disgrace. Russian President Vladimir Putin's barrage on a bomb shelter marked as housing children.
In the face of this new depravity, the church in Ukraine holds fast.
We are the church. We stay here. We do not run from war.
And as the people of Ukraine endure unimaginable suffering, a unique counseling program works to diffuse extreme emotional trauma.
There are some people that were trained are literally in the trenches right now as we speak.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Ukrainians fight back as the top diplomat for the United States doubles down in agreement with the president, calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening. I'm John Jessup. Secretary of State Antony Blinken weighing in earlier this afternoon saying he personally agrees with the war criminal characterization. And despite the insurmountable odds since Russia invaded Ukraine 3 weeks ago today, no major Ukrainian cities have fallen.
And now Ukrainian forces are reportedly going on the offensive, attempting to drive out Moscow's forces further back from Kyiv and other key cities. CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke is following the latest developments and has tonight's top story. Caitlin?
Not only is Ukraine on the offensive, according to the UK Ministry of Defense, Russia's invasion has largely stalled. British military intelligence saying Moscow's forces have suffered heavy losses and made very little progress on land, sea, or air in recent days.
The Russian army is stalled. The Ukrainian military has been able to stop its movement towards Kyiv and towards most of the big cities. So the Ukrainian military has done what no one expected it to do.
Ukrainian counterattacks not only focusing on Kyiv and outlying towns, but also to the south and east. An attack Tuesday on Russian-held Kherson International Airport appears to have destroyed at least 3 Russian helicopters. Still, airstrikes are pummeling Ukrainian cities. Among the latest targets, a theater in Mariupol, sheltering hundreds of civilians. Satellite images from before the attack show the words children written on the sides of the building in Russian. Authorities say there were survivors, but there's been no word yet on the number of deaths. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is pleading with the West to do more. Following an emotional appeal to the U.S. Congress, he spoke before Germany's parliament. Zelensky said the future of Europe is at stake, and Western governments are failing to meet the moment. Meanwhile, in an exclusive interview with NBC's Lester Holt, Zelensky said Russia will ultimately lose.
Our people are unconquerable, and this is what our people have clearly demonstrated. You can conquer the city, you can break the heart, but you won't be able to force anyone to love someone. That is why the heart will always remain with the Ukrainians.
Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, is beginning a new crackdown in Russia, targeting anyone who shows sympathy to the Western way of life.
But any people, even more so the Russian people, will always be able to distinguish true patriots from scum and traitors and simply spit them out like a fly that accidentally flew into the mouth. Spit them out. I'm convinced that such a natural and necessary cleansing of society will only strengthen our country.
Speaking on Ukraine today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says there's concern Russia will soon resort to new tactics, like using chemical weapons, bringing in foreign mercenary fighters, and kidnapping more local officials. Blinken called on Beijing to do more to condemn Moscow. President Biden has a meeting with China's president Friday and is expected to warn him that there will be consequences if he comes to Putin's aid in any way. John and Jenna.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And joining us now, Michael O'Hanlon, Senior Fellow and Director of Research in Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution. Michael, welcome. Let's start right there with China. What is in it for President Xi to side with Vladimir Putin?
Hi, Jenna. Well, I don't know that he's going to side with him militarily. My prediction would be that any weapons he might transfer, for example, will be done very discreetly and in small amounts and sort of dribbled out more as the minimal sign of some partial solidarity than any desire to make a major battlefield difference. The Chinese are in a tough spot. I'm not sure they're all that anxious about it, but they've got to balance in their mind, their loyalty to Russia, which is their main check on an American-led world that they're not totally happy with. And yet at the same time, balance that with their relations with us and Europe and the wealthy consumer markets that they still need for earning a lot of money from their exports and that they still need to work with on other security challenges. So I expect the Chinese to constantly balance. On matters of high politics, they'll criticize the United States for its alliance expansion and its global sense of, domineering behavior as they see it and where they agree with Russia. But in terms of actually giving Russia sustenance for the fight, they'll be much more parsimonious, much more limited in their help.
Do you think, watching now how demoralizing this invasion has been for the Russians, is making President Xi rethink or recalculate his invasion of Taiwan?
There's a lot of discussion about that kind of question in Washington and think tanks and Congress and the Pentagon. And I think the short answer is yes. I don't know that Xi was ever bent on attacking Taiwan. And by the way, he still may do it if he feels sufficiently provoked or devoid of other options. But I think seeing that the West is resilient enough to actually risk some of our own economic well-being, applying economic punishment against Russia, is sort of countering the myth that these dictators in China and Russia like to believe, that we in the West are all just too soft and too self-indulgent and too driven by the next political cycle to do anything tough that requires sacrifice from our own people. You remember when President Bush said that, soldiers should go to Iraq and others should go to the mall. That comment didn't go down so well. President Biden said, we're going to punish Russia, but try to protect American consumers. I didn't really love that comment either. I think we're better and we're stronger when presidents can level with us and say there's going to be some pain for us as well, but the stakes here are important enough to justify at least some pain for the American economy and consumer. And I think that's essentially what China's seeing now, as Biden's original statement is now being overtaken by events, and we are seeing some pain and some added inflation risk because of the Ukraine crisis.
All right, Michael Hanlon with the Brookings Institution, thank you so much for your time and always your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks, John and Jenna.
Well, though it has been just a matter of weeks since the start of the war in Ukraine, it's now the largest humanitarian crisis in Europe since World War II.
More than 3 million Ukrainians now refugees, with estimates suggesting that number could go as high as 7 million. The CBN's Brody Carter spoke to one couple who says God called them to rescue women and children fleeing Ukraine.
Refugees with nowhere to go are in desperate need, picking up the pieces of what's left of their lives. And while the brave men of Ukraine stay back to fight for their country, everyday people are becoming heroes by helping their wives and children forced to cross the border.
Without a longer-term plan here, the unknown is what's killing them. It's the fear that's inside of them.
The war has made winter even colder in Europe. Most refugees are now in Poland. Still, some 300,000 have fled to Romania. Kirk Nowry and his wife Violetta with Hope Partners International are among the few who have been called to help. They represent more than just hope for Ukraine. They believe they've been sent by God.
That's what we've been assigned to, Matthew 25 ministry, that as we do this to the least of these, those that suffer, it's the same as if we did it to Jesus.
The nonprofit has raised some $400,000, giving them the ability to fill vans with life-saving supplies, food and medicine. Then the drivers, who are Romanian pastors, risk their lives by crossing into the war zone.
They call it the Green Corridor, to cross the border and drive the supplies all the way to Odessa.
Odessa is now a main evacuation route for Ukrainian families. After unloading, the vans become evacuation vehicles, shuttling mostly women and children back to Romania.
And this is them and all their children. And here we're able to provide them a transition point. Food and shelter, medical care, dental care, non-food items because of your generous gifts.
We've been here working probably 12, 14 hours a day, trying to rescue as many as we can.
The exact number that we've rescued so far, 366. We have a church that's 100 meters from the border where they get their first night's sleep and warm blankets and help. And then we bus them down here to Constanza, where we're putting them everywhere, from homes to churches to basements to community centers to this hotel.
Kirk and Violetta are leaving briefly to raise more money before returning, only to help the ongoing humanitarian crisis. They said they will stay there for as long as they're needed, that if you can't help monetarily, your prayers are desperately needed. Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. And prayer indeed needed for so many. And that does include this church in this next story. It's in the Kyiv area, just miles from the front lines, and standing firm in the face of Russia's barrage of attacks.
CBN's George Thomas reports on how one church in the capital city is unleashing the power of prayer in the middle of some of the heaviest fighting since the war broke out.
The church is right there.
Yeah, the church is right there.
And the Russians? The red is the Russians.
Yeah, already is the Russians. And
so the church is in between Kyiv and the Russians, your church?
Yeah, yeah.
When you see all this red, do you get nervous?
No, no. We just pray.
You just pray.
Within hours of Russia's invasion, Grace Church, a prominent evangelical congregation in Kyiv, started holding prayer services every 4 hours.
We received a revelation from God that we are to pray. And the more the church is praying, it destroys the enemy and destructs their ability to shoot at Ukrainian territories, civilian targets, and our Ukrainian military.
Senior pastor Andrea Martinov firmly believes God is answering those prayers as Ukraine's military fights to rebuff Russian forces.
Ukraine will not be conquered by Russia. With God's help, Ukraine will overcome Russia.
Yet you cannot underestimate just how precarious the church sits geographically. On the western edge of Kyiv, Grace Church is 6 miles away from Russian forces.
Of course, we are in regular communication with the Ukrainian military. And if there's any immediate danger, we will inform our people. But we are the church. We stay here. We do not run from war.
Nearby explosions are a daily occurrence, as I discovered while working in the church's parking lot. Yet explosions do little to deter an army of volunteers like Natalie Novikova, who've been coming to the church every day since war started to sort, pack, and gather relief supplies.
Even though we hear the explosions, and sometimes they are very close, we just continue doing our ministry to help those who are in deeper need than we are. And that's why I'm not scared at all.
Even 11-year-old Elizabeth is here pitching in.
I feel good because I know that I'm doing something very important.
The church has so far helped some 60,000 people since Russia's invasion. And they tell me this humanitarian effort is going to continue for as long as it takes. In the meantime, their focus is on Russia, and they are praying for a major spiritual breakthrough.
I believe the end goal of this war will be the fall of Putinism, Stalinism, communism, and all the other ideas and ideologies which Russian mentality was built on.
Oleg Bogomaz, one of the key pastors here, is urging Christians worldwide to not only pray for his nation, but also for Russia, as they endure unprecedented political and economic upheaval.
This is my prayer. God, if you could save Nineveh, please save Russia as well.
Pastor Martinov believes the war will bring a spiritual breakthrough in Russia, leading to greater religious freedom.
The word of Jesus Christ will be freely preached in Russia. I firmly believe this, and this time will come. Mark my word, you'll see it.
George Thomas, CBN News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Some bold prayers. Thank you, George. Coming up, better than expected jobless claims, what that means for the economy in the face of record high inflation.
Well, welcome back. Some good news on the economy tonight. New unemployment numbers are down. The Labor Department reporting a drop of about 15,000 in the past week, now averaging 214,000 new claims. In total, just over 1.4 million people are receiving unemployment benefits. That number at a 50-year low. The latest numbers from the February month show about 678,000 new jobs were added to the economy. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports 10 states have hit record low unemployment.
And here with us now, research fellow at the Roe Institute at the Heritage Foundation, Joel Griffith. Joel, welcome. So positive news on the jobs front in the face of record-breaking inflation. Historically, Joel, what's the correlation between low unemployment and high inflation?
Well, typically you see an increase in employment with the inflation rate going up. But of course, we live in very unusual times where we're recovering from a period in which our government, for the first time in our nation's history, criminalized businesses from operating. So we're still seeing our economy adjust to that, which is why when I hear politicians claiming credit for jobs created, I laugh a bit, because these aren't jobs that are being created. These are jobs that are simply being allowed to come back now that the economy is being allowed to reopen.
So the Fed took the long-expected action yesterday of hiking interest rates. 6 more rate hikes are expected before the end of the year, each at about 1/4 point. Joel, your take on if that's going to help the situation and bring prices down?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a bit of a misnomer. The Fed doesn't actually control all of the interest rates in an economy. What's happened over the past 2 years is you had the Fed print trillions of dollars to buy up government debt, and the government then spent that money, and now it's in our economy. The danger is that as these funds that have already been spent get lent out by banks, that you're going to continue to see this money supply grow. And as you have a growing money supply, you end up with even more inflation. So the Federal Reserve has itself in a very difficult spot right now. It's a spot that they created for themselves. And along with Congress, Congress decided to spend trillions of dollars that we don't have, and the Federal Reserve decided to print the money to make that possible. And you're going to see a lot of finger pointing in the coming months and the coming years. Well, the politicians in D.C. are the ones that actually approved the spending, and the bankers at the Federal Reserve are the ones that decided to print the money to make it possible.
Let's all bring this back to the practical level, Joel. How does the rate hike impact people on Main Street trying to buy a house or a car, or maybe even getting a new credit card or paying down those balances?
Yeah, once again, the Fed has actually limited control over these interest rates. The bottom line here is that families are suffering from all the spending that occurred over the last 2 years by the federal government and all the money printing by the Fed. Whether interest rates go up or not, families are suffering from this very real rise in their living costs and the economic stagnation that might be following.
All right, Joel Griffith with the Heritage Foundation. Always good to have you. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Well, the war in Ukraine unleashing extreme emotional trauma on the people there. Up next, how a unique counseling program is helping to diffuse the suffering. Well, the people of Ukraine are enduring unimaginable suffering.
And one Christian college is helping them deal with the extreme trauma through a unique counseling program. CBN's Charlene Aaron has the story.
For nearly a decade, Regent University has been working with the government, churches, and universities to train counselors in Ukraine. With millions suffering in the recent Russian invasion, the work is needed now more than ever.
We first started in 2012 when I first came to Regent as a new faculty. And we had an invitation from a private Christian school to educate pastoral counselors at that time, Christian counselors.
Dr. Olya Zaporoshets, a Ukraine native, serves as an associate professor for Regent's School of Psychology and Counseling. Part of her work includes training mental health counselors in her home country, both online and in person. After Russia invaded and occupied the Crimean Peninsula of eastern Ukraine in 2014, the focus expanded from training just clergy to trauma counseling.
We saw it as consistent with our mission. We're here as an educational institution, but we want to make an impact on real-world issues where we can, while fulfilling that educational goal.
Dr. William Hathaway serves as Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Regent. He tells CBN News how the counseling program uses researched and well-recognized models for trauma care, while also including a Christian approach, especially now.
Who knows right now where things will go in Ukraine, but certainly people need all the resources they can get for resiliency. And I think those spiritual resources are particularly important for that. It helps instill hope. It also helps people in areas of dealing with pain and injury.
Zaporozhets says current events are having a big impact on their work because Ukrainians enrolled in the counseling program have been personally affected.
Let's stabilize our clinicians, and then that helps them to remember, hey, at this situation, you don't need to know a lot of things. You just could do breathing, and that works. That helps you come down and then see what the next thing would be. That is important for survival.
As the war continues, Regent plans to remain engaged and rebuild lives for as long as it takes.
Everything that I'm seeing right now on the mental health side, we're not going to have less work, but more. And at this point, we're standing alongside with all of our psychologists, counselors in Ukraine.
Many who have recently completed training are already making a difference.
There are some people that we trained are literally in the trenches right now as we speak. And there are people who are in military, there are people who are in hospitals. Those students who are Christians, they are a little more outspoken about miracles that God is doing during this war and how He's responding to prayers, which are undeniable.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thank you, Charlene. Coming up, St. Patrick's Day celebrations getting the green light. We'll show you where when Faith Nation returns.
Your news channel, your shows, the stories you care about. Anytime you want, anywhere you want. Download the CBN News app today.
Finally tonight, St. Patrick's Day parades are finally back.
After 2 years of canceled celebrations due to the pandemic, cities all over the United States are going all out. New York City bringing back the annual Fifth Avenue St. Patrick's Day parade. In Chicago, going green, dumping nearly 45 pounds of colored dye into the Chicago River. Overseas, the home of St. Patrick focused on a show of support for Ukraine. The Irish government there distributing their annual St. Patrick's Day video, this year highlighting the Irish and the Ukrainian flags.
We go marching down the road to freedom.
A strong show of solidarity with the Irish and people all over the world standing with Ukraine.
Indeed. Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.
Thanks for watching. Happy St. Patrick's Day. See you tomorrow.